Hi.
Let me turn up the volume. We're working with a new setup here in our new space, so we're working on it. All right, Jamal, could you say something to us, please?
Yes. How you doing?
Yeah, audio works. Okay, so we have audio and video set up. We should be good to go. So if you will get us started, please, Jamal.
All right, thank you. I cannot share my screen. Can you give me the permission?
I will fix it, yes. Always a fun thing about Zoom calls is someone forgetting to turn on the share screen. Okay.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is Jamal. I'm a PhD student of Transportation Engineering and Civil Engineering Department. I would like to thank Dr. Murdoch for giving us this opportunity to present at the Writing Center. And today I want to talk about how to write a literature review, a successful literature review in transportation engineering. And I give you some points that will be helpful for writing a literature review in any field that you prefer to do. So the first question that we can ask is that why we need to write a literature review. There are some reasons for that, and that we need to communicate with audiences of transportation studies and technologies, which those audiences are researchers from same discipline or researchers from other disciplines, such as electrical engineering, industrial engineering, that are following same methods. And also general audiences that are interested in transportation studies and technologies and want to follow up the literature review of those of transportation engineering studies. So a literature review can help us, can help these audiences to firstly get the feedback, the previous studies on that topic, and see what was going on that specific topic of that transportation engineering. Also, they can save time instead of studying each research one by one. They can read a literature review and save time. And finally, they can identify the recent methods on that specific topic and detect the gaps and outline the areas for the future study they want to follow up. So there are different parts in a literature review. There are three parts actually. The first part is introduction, which introduction includes two main important subparts. The first one is topic, that you need to explain your topic in a sentence. For example, you can see here that we mentioned in this section, we want to do the literature review on that specific topic. And then in another sentence, you'll start to talk about the initial researcher of that topic, who started that topic, who proposed that topic, and what was the reason of researching on that topic. That will be another sentence, the next sentence of the literature review. The next part of the literature review is body, that includes a discussion of studies, but also talk about the pros and cons of studies in that research topic that you are doing the literature review. So for example, you can see here, I mentioned two studies in a paragraph. I firstly mentioned what was the feature of that study, and also I mentioned the pros and cons of that study, and those two studies in another sentence. Finally, in a conclusion part, we'll talk about our contributions based on the literature review that we have done. We can summarize those contributions by a sentence and then provide them by number format. And also we can talk about our research feature based on the contribution that we can explain, we explained before. So for example, I mentioned here, we propose a specific model and mentioned the feature of that model specifically, which shows my research features in a sentence. And finally, we can use a summary table, which I will explain it and present it to you in another slide, which is a very good tool for providing your literature review in a table. Where do students struggle the most? Based on my experience, that I've seen people that students have lots of problem in the body part of the literature review because of different reasons. The first one is lack of current literature review, and other reasons are they're talking about irrelevant or unfocused content, and they're doing description instead of integration and analysis of pros and cons of that studies. And finally, I've seen lots of people that they're doing the plagiarism not intentionally, but they're making mistakes that lead to plagiarism or poor referencing, which I'll explain you each of these problems and some ways to avoid these problems and challenges. So you can avoid the lack of current literature review by providing a strong literature review that have some features. The first feature is that you need to incorporate current literature review, not just use the previous study. You need to talk about the recent studies. You can use different search engine, such as Google Scholar, such as Scopus, Science Direct. Based on your field, it can be different. And one of the most known is Google Scholar, that includes also not only universities publications, but also different journals publications. So you can see I've used this filter on the left side of this picture that I've used since 2018 to avoid old research. And I wrote the keyword that I'm looking for in the search tab, which here is autonomous vehicles. And you can use different topics as you want, based on what you want. Also, we can compare and contrast the classics with more up-to-date research and mention what was the features of those classics and what are the features of the new studies. And finally, we can talk about the evolution of the study, which I'll explain in a table, that you can show it in a table, the evolution of that topic from the first research to the last or the most recent research that you have. For avoiding irrelevant or unfocused content, you need to focus on your research objectives and research questions. So firstly, you need to define the research objectives and research questions when you want to do a study, and you can ask your advisor or you can ask your mentor to help you for doing that. And based on that, you need to stay on that topic and focus on that to avoid any irrelevant or unfocused content. For that purpose, you can define some criteria such as keywords, such as solution methods and research topics, which also you can ask your advisor, you can ask your mentor, and you can search on the internet to find good criteria for avoiding unfocused content and use those keywords in the search engine, which I showed you in the previous slide. One of the good tools for doing the literature review and saving lots of time is studying review papers. In lots of research fields, I've seen different review papers based on different topics. So you can find the review papers for the topic that you are doing the literature review. And firstly, study those review papers because they are categorizing. They have categorized the papers and research on that specific topic. So you can study the literature, the review papers, and after that, you need to only study the papers that are published data of the review paper. So you can save time instead of reading the studies from the first study to the last one. So keep it in mind to use a review paper. So let me ask you a question. Uh, a literature review is a summary of each research source. Do you think it's true or false? You can raise your hand, or because no one is in the Zoom, I mean, a student, so you can raise your hand and tell me if it's true. Raise your hand if you think it's true. I'll give you 30 seconds to think about it.
Got the sense that I was wrong.
All right, 10 more seconds. Give me a solution, guys. So I assume you're not raising your hand because you think it's false, right?
Yes.
Okay, you're right. I mentioned. Yes. Congratulations. I mentioned that the literature review is just not explaining the studies, which is a challenge. You need to talk about the studies, but you need to have a critical review. You need to talk about the pros and cons of those studies and the features that they've used, but those features that they haven't considered in that study. And the last problem and challenge which we have with the literature review is the plagiarism and poor referencing. So you can avoid this problem by citing while you write, because you are using multiple sources when you write the literature review. It's better to cite when you write, so then you can avoid something like you can forget those citations later. So it's better to cite while you write. And you can use different citation software such as Mendeley, such as EndNote. It depends on your preference. You can use them. Also, you need to avoid any sequence more than 3 words. That's the rule of thumb for literature review. And you need to paraphrase whatever you use from others, not use exact words. But when you want to use exact words and you need to show them to others, something like mostly for definitions, you can use short quotations for specific sentences or a specific part of those sentences. But the most important thing is that you need to document all media, including images and graphics. So you need to cite whatever you use from others, not just the study, but also the images and graphics. So how we can increase our effectiveness when we write a literature review? The first important thing is that you need to be prepared for the writing process. I've seen many students that think about that they can write a literature review in some days or in a week, but that's wrong. You need to focus on your literature review, and that takes months. Yes, months. And you need to update the review regularly. It means that whenever you write the literature review, for example, for 2 months, after that, you'll go to other sections of your study, your thesis, your dissertation, or your report, which can be a model, simulation, results of your study. But whenever you write those sections, there are some other peoples in your research field that they're publishing. So you need to update your literature review based on the recent studies, and also see what contributions they have used. So if they have proposed some contributions that you use, you need to think about it, because you need to provide novel contributions. So then if you saw that, that's not a good chance. But if you saw that, you need to think about your contributions and add more contributions to have a novel research. But you need to synthesize and analyze your content, and you can use some graphic organizers and great tools to show your contributions efficiently. One of the tools is a summary table, which I've talked, which you can see in the column. I have used different contributions that people use so far. And also in the rows, you can see the references that I've discussed about them in the literature review. And finally, I added my paper in the last row. So you can use the star mark or check mark to show different contributions that each reference have used, and finally show your research. So this is a very good tool for reviewers of a journal, for those people that wanna see your report, and they can just take a look at this table in a second and see what was going on the literature review and save the time. So this is a good tool for not just my field, it works for every field that you want to study. And so you can use this table and you can ask me a question about it finally if you have any question. So finally, we can say a literature review is successful if it has some features. The first one is that you can use that literature review results in other sections of your report, your thesis, your dissertation, or your journal paper. So you can show the results based on the gap and the contributions you want to use in the literature review, and also the tables and graphs in other sections such as sensitivity analysis and results of your paper. Finally, the good literature review or successful literature review can lead to a great conclusion based on the gap you covered in your study. And in the last sentence of the report, you can mention about some future idea, which the title of that sentence would be future research or future ideas. So you can propose some future ideas for people that want to follow up your research later. Thank you very much for your attention. And I would like to thank my mentor, Dr. Jennifer Forsberg, for her great comments and guidance. Thank you.
Right, do we have any questions? I wanted to say that the table in particular caught my attention because when I was working on literature reviews for my own work, I always did color coding, which fits my personality, but it's certainly not efficient. So this is a wonderful example, and I think it could be very, very helpful not only to the students here as they're working on their own work, but to students who come into the lab. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I've received great comments also from reviewers of my papers that they say that's a great tool that you showed us what was the features of the studies in the literature review, and we can save the times. Yes, that's a great tool. You can use it in any field that you're studying.
Awesome, awesome.
I had a question, if I could just take 1 minute. So you present introduction, body, and conclusion. Is that for each article you read? Or you're talking about the whole lit review?
No, it's just for whole literature review section.
Okay, yeah, it would just, that would take a lot of integration even to do that, because you know, the topics, the topic, the initial for instance, and their introduction, the initial research and reason, that would be per author, right?
Actually, that's because in a literature review, usually we are focusing on a research topic or maximum 2 research topics. So for that research topic, initially we mentioned what is the research topic, and then we talk about the initial research that initially proposed that research topic to the audiences, and then we'll go over to those other studies that use the same research topic and talk about it. So that's for whole part of the literature review, not just for each study.
Okay, so this is really cumulative, that as opposed to individual pieces.
Yeah.
I think that might be interesting to point out.
Yeah, thank you. Any other question? All
No,
right.
I think we're okay in here. Thank you so much for your presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Alrighty, so hello, my name is LaToya Mcdonald. I am a PhD candidate for bioengineering. And so I am going to talk to you guys about applying rhetorical writing to FDA documents for reprocessed medical devices. And this is just a picture of my lab. We work in Greenville at Prisma Health in the simulation lab. So first off, what is rhetorical writing? It is essentially persuasive writing. And I have this cartoon of Brian and Sally. Brian and Sally both want a raise. So Brian is thinking about what he's going to write to his boss. Dear boss, I want a raise. I need more money because I work harder than Sally, Brian. And that's how he signs his letter. So Sally comes in and she realizes that, Brian says, hey, I'm asking the boss for a raise. So Sally thinks more rhetorically in her writing, and she says, well, have you considered what her objections might be and the opposing point of view? Have you thought about her needs, and what about formatting? Who else might read your request? Is your tone respectful? Brian brushes it off, and as a result, the boss in the last cartoon is reading both their proposals and goes, what a persuasive letter. I'm going to give Sally a big raise. Oh, and I've got to remember to fire Brian next time I see him. So this is just an example of how rhetorical writing or persuasive writing can come into play in different areas. Again, we're going to talk about FDA documents a little later, but rhetorical writing can be applied to so many different fields and so many different situations. Sally was thinking about her audience. She was thinking about the structure of the proposal that she was presenting. She was being very, very strategic, thinking, okay, would my boss have any reason to oppose my proposal for a raise? She was very purposeful, clear, concise. She validated the facts. Brian just said, hey, I work harder. What does that mean? So thinking about these things when you're writing rhetorically so that you can have an effective result, these are things that you think about when you present a rhetorical or you apply rhetorical writing to your papers. And then finally, reading experience, your transitions, your wording, your choice of words and things like that. Will my audience actually be able to understand what I'm saying? So what are some characteristics of rhetorical or persuasive writing? So it goes into a little more detail, but I'm just going to hit a few things here. Your who's, your how's, and your knows. Persuasive writing who's. Who is your target audience? Who is your secondary audience? And who are you to your audience? So when we think about it, again, in the previous situation, his main targeted audience was his supervisor. But remember, Sally asks, is anyone else going to read this proposal? There may be other people. Most people in industry, they have a team of people who make those decisions for hiring or giving a raise. But even if you think about it on a student level, if you're going to a conference and you're presenting your paper, yes, your target audience are the people in your field, but at most conferences, there are people from different backgrounds and different fields of study that may be reading your audience. So these are meeting your article. These are things that you think about when you're writing rhetorically. Your persuasive hows. How does the audience actually receive your information? Formatting matters. So I can't just, if I'm sending a message to some of my peers, an email, a really quick email, I wouldn't have the same formatting as I would if I'm sending it to a supervisor or an advisor or a future employer. And then persuasive writing knows. What do you know? What information are you actually going to present? What does your audience know? Am I presenting or am I writing to someone who is very knowledgeable about the topic? Or am I providing information for them? Do they not know something? And what don't I know? And how can I fill in those gaps? So regulatory agencies. One of the things that I wanted to just kind of touch on are there are so many different agencies, and the regulatory agencies or organizations, they essentially provide us the guidelines, the structures that we need. There are agencies and organizations within every single field. So you have Consumer Product Safety Commission, Environmental Protection Agency, the FDA, which is what we're probably more familiar with, the Federal Food and Drug Administration, and so many different things. In purple are your government agencies. So I decided to also just highlight some of the things that we do in school. We have conference posters, we have scientific articles, thesis, and things like that. So we use those as building blocks so that when we get into industry and we have these governing agencies or organizations that have specific protocols, specific systems in place for us when we're communicating, we build up on that skill of rhetorical writing by using some of these things that we do now when it comes to, again, like I said, conferences, articles, and things like that. We begin to apply those skill sets. So once we get into industry, we're better prepared and equipped. So why do we take regulations and proposals for reprocessed medical devices seriously? So when we think about our purpose, why are we actually writing? And these are just a few images of medical devices here that you have. When you go to the dentist, these are things you commonly see. But again, because they are reprocessed, there's a certain protocol that goes into place so that as these devices are used from patient to patient, they don't cause harm to the patient, they don't cause diseases or anything like that. And so it has to go through a certain protocol through the FDA so that they are cleared, not just the device themselves, the design of the device, but also the design or the protocol itself to reprocess the device to make sure that they're sterile and decontaminated. So I have a scenario here, and then we're going to go through a 510K device. So Imaginary Hospital is known for having the best outcome for upper GI endoscopies. Endoscopes are used to view the inside of a person's GI or any cavity within the body. And as you can see, it's essentially a camera that goes in through the mouth, and you can see the inside of the stomach, for example. So Imaginary Hospital administrator decides to investigate new endoscopes on the market to improve their procedures and increase the success rates even more for their team. They reach out to medical science liaison to share information on their reusable endoscopy devices. After review, Dr. Goodlooking and his staff decide that they can develop a better device than what is on the market. So they decide to submit a 510K proposal to the FDA based on their knowledge and experience. So we're just going to walk through those who's, those hows for the 510K with Dr. Goodlooking and his staff. So who is your target audience? Again, the gastrointestinal urology FDA, we're looking at specifically endoscopes in this scenario. So while the FDA has an entire system in place for within that regulatory system, we know that we're specifically targeting the ones who are specialized in gastrointestinal procedures or devices. And we're also focusing on the company, the hospital, NIH, NSF, whoever is actually sponsoring our project. And our secondary audience would be our healthcare workers. And then us, our role within this paper would be our proposer, proposer and researcher. So our writing hows. Dr. Goodlooking and his team would have to submit a 510K submission. And this is just an outline of what a 510K would look like. You have your objective, your scope, references, general product description, regulatory system, process requirements, device specifications, document revision history. And again, understanding that this is an informational and persuasive document. So again, just thinking about all of these who's and hows when you're presenting or when you're developing your document. And then your knows. Things to think about. What do you know? Are there similar items already on the market? Endoscopes are a very common medical device. So we know that there are already items on the market. We can use that as building blocks. Your experiments and your personal experience. And what does your audience know? Again, we're talking to professionals here in this scenario. So they already know that the device works, how the device works, and the protocols to reprocess. If we were discussing or talking to an audience that had no idea, then we would keep that into consideration when we're wording and using our language. And what does the audience need to know? In this specific scenario, they need to know what is different about the device that I'm producing. So Dr. Goodlooking and his team were successful in submitting their 510K proposal. They were approved, and now they're able to successfully do endoscopies for their hospital with success. So just a really quick recap. Again, I gave two different scenarios, one with Brian and Sally and another with FDA 510K devices. So when you are writing rhetorically, you're looking at your who, you're looking at your how, and you're looking at your no. Keeping these things in mind when you are actually writing your paper, because you're writing with purpose, and you're not just writing just to submit a document for whether it's for a federal agency, whether it's for your professor, whether it's for a conference, but just keeping these things in mind. So just a few takeaways. I want you guys to just think about how you can write rhetorically in your class assignments, how you can apply rhetorical writing in professional development. And then I want to challenge you to find the regulatory organizations in your field to determine the types of documents that they receive and determine how you can use rhetorical writing within those documents. To thank the Pearce Writing Center, and if anyone is actually interested in medical devices, there is a certificate program through Clemson University. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much for that presentation. I learned a lot. I know that I have a question real quick. What is a revision history when doing a 510 outline?
So not all 510Ks are actually accepted immediately, because again, it goes through a very rigorous process. You're dealing with people's lives, cross-contamination and things like that. And so if they find anything wrong with your proposal, it can very easily be sent back, but they allow you to resubmit it, and you have to keep record of every single time you submit. Any edits that you make, any any alterations or anything like that to every proposal that you submit for that device.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Additional questions? Oh, you're gonna clap. We had an instinct to clap again. I don't think we have any additional questions in here.
Okay.
I wonder, LaToya, so this seems it's both general and yet very specific. So what kinds of documents would these our writing lab personnel are helping students that might come in with the document. What's something that they could perhaps see from either a graduate student or an undergraduate? What kind of document might come in from your field that would be related to this this very sort of meticulous preparation, document preparation? Could you give them a little bit of an insight as to what they might see?
Yeah, so for example, if I were to create a new device that had to be tested, we would actually look at the microbiology. We would use different testing soils and things like that. So we would actually have to provide the experimental design and the results of our experiment. So a regular scientific or lab experiment or proposal that includes all of that information, the design, the results, the statistics, the data, all of that information can be found in one of those documents. Yeah.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Any other questions, Chelsea?
Let's see. Any questions for both our presenters? Really good. Yeah. Very informative. You learned a lot? Yes. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we recorded your presentations. I'll send you the link so that you can see the recordings. But we are very grateful. Thank you for your expertise and for speaking with us today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you, guys.
Chelsea. Thanks for letting us come. Thank you,
Yes,
Jamal
thank
and LaToya.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Have a good weekend.
You
You
too.
too.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. All right, the recording's ending, so everybody wave. Bye-bye. Oh. Not that it works.